Hi guys, I'm Courtney.
And I'm Lisa.
And we are the hosts of The Book of the Dead, a true crime podcast based out of New Jersey, where we tell you about the most obscure cases that you may have never heard of. So join us in the Book of the Dead library for another chapter of The Book of the Dead wherever you get your podcasts. Bye guys.
Devil is on his way. Devil is on his way, motherfucker. The devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way. Fall to your knees. Devil gonna make you pay. Fall to your knees. Devil is on his way.
Mountain Murders is an Appalachian true crime podcast. Some content may not be suitable for all listeners. Listener discretion is advised.
We say fuck a lot.
Hey, y'all. Welcome back to Mountain Murders. I'm Heather.
And I'm Dylan.
Hey, Dylan.
Hey, Heather.
How are you?
I'm well traveled.
You hanging in there?
Yeah, we had a big day.
How did those 31 flights of stairs do you?
Oh my gosh. We finally made it down to Tallulah Gorge, right?
Tallulah Gorge State Park in Georgia.
We've been talking about going there for like a year now.
Actually, more than that.
More than that. And it was so amazing, I must say.
Yeah, we got to ride down with our friends, another couple, enjoyed a lovely hike around, if you can call it that. You're traversing stairs.
It had a high quality infrastructure, I must say.
So many stairs.
Yeah. It was.
Okay. I'm surprised I'm able to sit. My butt is going to be so sore tomorrow.
No, you would go to turn out a trail, and it would be like, look, to go down there and back, it's like 1,500 stairs, or 1,200, or 1,000, or 800. Yeah, so they were warning you before you took off.
And I was proud of myself today. I crossed a suspension bridge.
That was moving.
A swingy old wooden bridge, right?
Above the gorge.
Yeah. I'm not a big fan of heights, so this was a big day for me. I was proud of myself for crossing the bridge.
Honey, I must say I was proud of you as well.
And in the little visitor center, they had aquariums with snakes. I even walked up and looked at the snakes and didn't die.
She was next to the snakes, y'all.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
It's like a new me, Dylan.
Heather,
but Tallulah Gorge is absolutely gorgeous. If you are in or around the area, highly recommend it. Beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah, and I must say, I think we were very close to our friends Tish and Tom. So, hey, guys.
Yeah,
it was
right.
a beautiful day, and here we are invigorated in the Mountain Murder studio.
And ready to talk true crime.
Oh, my God, I've been thinking about true crime the whole time.
You have?
I was like, this is a great place to hide a body. You know,
I bet you probably were thinking that, Dylan.
Well, if you were going to toss one off, it was some really quality.
Why does that sound vulgar? That. You know, if you're about to toss one off,
a body that is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does that clean it up?
Sure.
Okay, so I'm really excited for the story this week, and I can't wait to dive in.
Are you ready?
I've already started.
Yeah, okay, let's get into it. Rita Patricia Curran was born June 21st, 1947 in Brooklyn, New York, to parents Thomas and Mary Curran. She was one of 3 children, her brother, and she also had a sister named Thomas and Mary. The Curran family later moved to Burlington, Vermont, where Rita attended Mount St. Mary's Academy, a private Catholic girls' school. According to the Vermont Standard, the Currans were a well-known family. Rita's father worked at the IBM facility in Burlington, and he and his wife also owned a diner and rental cabins on Arrowhead Mountain Lake.
Wow.
Now, Dylan, I know that you know a little bit about stuff, right?
I know.
Just a little bit. Just enough to get you in trouble.
A little bit about stuff.
Back in the day, if you were employed by IBM, that was a big deal.
It was. It was one of those. They were one of the largest employers in America, And yeah, it was a bit. It kind of came with a panache to it.
It did. I mean, this is like the beginning of computers,
Yes.
back when they like would take up an entire room.
It's funny. The story of IBM is really interesting because they were at the forefront of computing and actually applying the computer's power to solve problems in business, as far as calculations and paperwork and stuff goes. But they kind of got surpassed in ways by other more innovative young startups. But IBM's always been at the forefront of computers and computer technology.
You're absolutely right, Dylan. After earning her degree at Trinity College in 1969, Rita became a second grade teacher at Milton Elementary School. During the summer, though, Rita took classes at the University of Vermont and worked part-time as a chambermaid at the Colonial Motor Inn. Rita moved out of her parents' house and into her first apartment soon after her 24th birthday in 1971. She had lived at home her entire life up until that point. She started perusing the classified ads in the Burlington Free Press newspaper and found an ad for a temporary roommate. It was just for like the summer term, and this seemed appealing to her. She's a young woman. She's got her first like big girl job, and now she wants to move out and be on her own.
I would like to be a seasonal roommate. Yeah.
Just for the summer?
I'd be like, I think he's went bad. He's past his shelf life.
He's spoiled. Rita felt the living situation would be a good fit. She was eager to spread her wings and get a taste of independence. Rita would be sharing a room with another roommate, Beverly Lamphere, and a third woman, Carrie Duane. She had the second bedroom in the apartment. And though newspapers at the time say those were the only 3 people who lived in the apartment, investigative documents state there was also a man living in the unit.
Oh my
His name was Paul Robinson, and he shared the second bedroom with Carrie Duane. So they're a couple, and they're living together in this apartment situation. Of course, this was salacious at the time.
Oh my gosh.
And this is in the early 70s. This is after the sexual revolution.
Yes.
Young people are kind of doing things a little different.
We're doing it in the open side.
But, the newspaper is not going to report this.
No, it's not going to report any of that. But, a lot of times, you would have stories like this back in the day. It's a type of story that gets the tongues a-wagging in the local gossip circles,
There was a supplementary report released in 2023, so this year, by the Burlington Police Department that described Robinson and Duane as a couple and that they cohabitated together at this residence. The Rutland Daily Herald reported that Rita didn't know her roommates prior to moving in with them, and they hadn't become close friends in the short weeks that she lived there. Known as a shy person, Rita already had her own close-knit group of friends, which she spent time with. She also traveled 25 miles to Milton to visit her family a lot in the time she lived in the Brook Street apartment. Rita's roommates would later say she rarely spent time in the apartment at all, using it only for sleeping purposes. When she wasn't working or studying, Rita loved singing and was part of several choirs and even something described as a barbershop quartet.
Oh, okay.
Throughout the years. So Rita was part of this quartet, and on the evening of July 19th, 1971, Rita had a practice session with the group. After practice, she went home to the apartment, put her hair up in curlers, and changed into her pajamas and housecoat. She was ready to settle into bed. Sometime after she fell asleep, her roommate, Beverly Lamphere, took the only apartment key and departed to meet friends at a nearby bar around 11 p.m. She left the apartment door unlocked so that Carrie Duane and Paul Robinson could enter without trouble. So this is at a time when, people leave their doors unlocked. It's not a big deal.
No, it's not a big deal. And people weren't so hyper vigilant, always thinking about what could happen. They kind of just went off what they saw around them. They didn't see a whole lot of crime, a whole lot of violent crime especially. And yeah, it wasn't a big deal. I've had many friends whose homes were always open. And they would even say, hey, if you got to pee, you're near the house, go by there and pee.
I was going to say my bestie we went hiking with today.
Yeah.
Always leaves her. Well, now she doesn't because she is living elsewhere. But when she had her apartment, she left the door unlocked. Nice. And I knew that if I was ever out and about, I could always go by her apartment. If I needed a sandwich, a place to use a bathroom, needed to catch a nap, hide from cops, whatever.
Oh my gosh.
I'm just kidding.
That's a multi-purpose unit.
Exactly. And I'm like, girl, lock your door. And she's like, why? I'm not there. I don't care.
Yeah, what are they going to do? Take the toilet paper?
Exactly. The apartment at 17 Brooks Avenue was located on a quiet residential street lined with trees. Single family and double family residences. So there were quite a bit of duplex style apartments along this street as well, made up the neighborhood. An anonymous student would later tell a news source, quote, "Nothing ever happens over there," which is likely how Rita Curran felt about her new digs. She's in a nice, quiet residential neighborhood, a lot of families, college students, no problems. Right?
Yeah, I agree. It sounds like a quaint, quiet neighborhood. You can't beat that.
Earlier that evening, around 7:30 p.m. on the night of July 19th, Paul Robinson waited outside his girlfriend Carrie Dwayne's job to pick her up after her shift. It was a Monday night, but still early. They decided to stop by their apartment to change clothes. They went to the Harbor Hideaway restaurant to grab dinner and drinks. By the way, I want to go eat at the Harbor Hideaway. It sounds fun.
God, I bet they have the best seafood ensemble.
I bet you could get some steamers there.
Dude, I bet
some
you
lobster,
get like
some steamers.
a sampler plate. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you would just want all the fried shit,
A
don't
little
you?
bit of everything.
It's like, bring me some clams.
Yeah, give me some
Okay.
catfish.
So around 11:15 p.m., Paul and Carrie were still hanging out at the bar, and that's when they decided to invite their other roommates, Rita and Beverly, out for a drink. Paul phoned the apartment, and he spoke briefly with Beverly. Rita was asleep in the bedroom that she and Beverly shared, so Beverly went off to meet her two roommates for a drink and left Rita behind.
Oh, so she gets this call from her friends who are like, hey, come out. We've been having a good time. Come have a drink with us. But she's already asleep, Beverly, right?
Yeah, Rita's not really, I guess, one to socialize with this particular group. She's kind of still the new roommate. She kind of does her own thing. So Beverly didn't want to wake her up. I mean, she kind of knew Rita was probably not going to go with her.
Right. And so she's just going to slip out and have a drink right down the road, right?
Apparently, probably is my favorite word today. So, yeah, I reckon so. By 12:30 a.m., Paul was ready to call it a night. So he and Carrie paid their tab and headed for the apartment. Beverly decided to linger at the bar a bit longer. When Paul and Carrie got back to the apartment, they noticed that Rita's door was ajar, like just a tiny bit, but they didn't pry. They stayed up for a while longer, and when Beverly arrived, the three of them sat in the living room, just chit-chatting, talking, hanging out. Carrie and Paul went to their bedroom, while Beverly headed to the room she shared with Rita. Before Carrie and Paul got into bed, they heard Beverly say from across the hall, "Something is wrong with Rita."
Oh, my gosh.
As soon as Beverly opened the door, she found Rita lying on the floor. Rita was partially naked with her clothes sort of shoved like between her legs.
Oh, Jesus.
She had curlers in her hair. The young woman's face was bruised and bloodied. It has been reported that they tried to resuscitate Rita, but she was already dead.
I'm just
at
saying,
this point.
in the first moments as you open the door, and be it the light from the hall, or if you do turn the light on in the room, and you're here it is. That sounds very unnatural to me. If you find someone laying in the floor, let alone bloodied and bruised, but their clothes shoved down, but kind of between their legs area, and I don't know. I would find it instantly off-putting and scary.
No, this is like a nightmare.
Yeah,
This
definitely.
is horrific. An investigation was quickly launched by the Burlington Police Department. The medical examiner determined that Rita had been beaten, strangled, and sexually assaulted. It was likely she had died sometime around midnight. Rita was described as a petite woman who only weighed 104 pounds. Friends said she was not that strong, so if she did try to fight off an attacker, it wouldn't have helped her much. She did have wounds on her hands, which suggested that she had tried to, fend off the attacker.
Well, I think in a situation like that, you instinctually try as hard as you can to fend off your attacker, if you will. Yeah.
The young woman kept the doors unlocked, so there was no sign of forced entry. Robbery was soon ruled out as a motive. Investigators did find traces of blood on the back door. The blood belonged to Rita and had likely been transferred onto the killer who fled the scene. Police speculated possibly after hearing the roommates returning. the killer might have still been in the apartment.
Oh my gosh.
Investigators theorized that Rita had been sleeping in the bed when she was attacked. She was sexually assaulted, strangled, and brutally beaten in the head and face, according to the medical examiner.
So it's just very violent crime.
Very violent crime.
I've always thought blunt force trauma, crimes
Just
and deaths,
beating someone
to death either with your hands or an object. It takes way more than one strike, like you see in movies. Someone hits somebody on the head with something, they fall out, knocked out at the very least. That's just not the reality of what happens. People typically, start screaming, fighting, flailing around when you strike them upon the head. And just to be able to...
Excruciatingly painful way to die as well.
Yes, definitely.
Murders were uncommon in the area, which left investigators baffled. At first, they thought perhaps the suspect might be a University of Vermont student, since the campus was only 3 blocks away. Law enforcement seized numerous items in Rita and Beverly's bedroom. They collected and bagged as evidence things like hair that was clutched in Rita's hands,
oh my gosh,
fingernail scrapings, Rita's torn nightgown and housecoat, the bed sheets, the bedspread, hair curlers, among some other items found at the scene. They had hair, blood, and biological matter on some of these items. However, we have to remember this is 1971, so forensics are very limited.
So I must say, I applaud them for being, this is going to be forward thinking at this point to bag this type of evidence, to get everything like that. But the problem is they don't have the technology to really do a whole lot with it after the fact. But I must say, these investigators they're on the cutting edge of forensic technologies at the time.
A cigarette butt was discovered laying underneath Rita's elbow on the floor. It was a Lark charcoal filter tip cigarette. It looked as if the cigarette had burned out there under the body. Ash from the cigarette was found on the floor between Rita's body and her right arm. The cigarette butt was collected as evidence. Rita's hair curlers, which she was known to wear to bed, were strewn about the room. The curtains had been torn from the rods, and her bed was pushed away from the wall. So as you can see, or, picture of this situation in your brain, Dylan. This is a violent assault. She's fighting for her life. You've got curtain rods torn down.
Yeah.
The bed moved clear across the room,
Basically,
away from the wall.
Yeah. Everything in the room has been, kind of knocked over or moved from its original position. So I think you could glance at this room and know there was an intense struggle of some sort.
The perimeter around the house was examined for any clues as to where the perpetrator may have entered. The driveway, which had a sandy section, didn't show any noticeable footprints. According to the report by Detective Richard Ballou, it appeared that no one had walked on that section of the driveway since a rainstorm the day before.
Can I say, I wish I had a sandy driveway. It sounds like kind of fancy in a way.
It sounds like a mess.
It sounds like
you
a
know
mess.
You're going to track that sand in on your shoes every time you come in my house.
I have a sandy driveway.
And then I'm going to have to vacuum and mop and sweep even more than I do now. And I'm not going to like that, bud.
So you're saying my sandy driveway be all up in your foyer?
The only thing that's going to accompany the sandy driveway to make me happy is a sandy fucking beach in my backyard, okay?
That's what I was trying to get at.
Okay.
Because how in the hell you got just a sandy driveway, bud? You paid somebody to come put sand in your driveway?
These folks are in Vermont, and they have a sandy driveway.
Yeah, I know. I'm wondering where the sand came from in the driveway. Maybe, actually, if it had to be raised up any sort of amount of inches at some point, if there's a sinkhole area, sand would be a great medium for that.
Are you done?
Yeah.
Moving along. The grass in the yard, though long and wet, didn't show any tracks or trampled areas where someone might have stepped. While they were surveying the outside of the building, detectives found that a window to the apartment near the front door was unlocked, but it was difficult to open and seemed to stick. So they kind of ruled out that the person had come through the window because they're like, this window sticks. You can barely raise it.
Yeah, we have multiple windows like that in this old house.
Old houses, yeah.
Old swollen window jams and stuff.
Yeah.
And you go to shove them up and you get them about 8 inches and it totally just wedges in there and will not go any further.
That you just described every window in our home. There was a storage. It sounds almost like a utility closet on the porch. A little storage room.
Yeah.
A trash can was found inside that utility closet that had been overturned as if someone had come in and like stepped up on this trash can.
Okay.
Although I don't know exactly why they would be stepping up on this trash can.
I enjoy standing on trash cans.
Chief Medical Examiner Lawrence Harris performed Rita Curran's autopsy. Dr. Harris found that Rita Curran's cause of death was asphyxia by manual strangulation. She had been severely beaten and sexually assaulted, as I had mentioned. The manner of death was labeled a homicide. Given the timeline of Rita's roommates leaving and returning to the apartment, it was estimated that she was killed between 11:20 p.m. on July 19th and 12:30 a.m. on July 20th. So that's a mere 70-minute window.
That's a rather small window.
That is a pretty small window when we're talking about a home invasion, a murder,
and so
and
this
escape.
is strictly based off the roommates having seen her, been there, everything's fine, and when they returned.
Yes.
So that's a solid window. There's not a whole lot of doubt.
As detectives worked to develop a victimology for Rita Curran, that narrow time frame would become a pretty important consideration in the investigation. Chittenden County prosecutor Patrick Leahy said it was, quote, the most brutal murder I've seen since taking office. And by the way, I think he's like a state senator now.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Edgy residents on Burlington's west side were growing anxious as police had no progress to report in the days following the murder. Over the course of the investigation, detectives questioned more than 100 people and administered 3 lie detector tests. Then they did a roundup of sex offenders in the area. A Burlington detective quickly ventured to Washington, D.C. to meet with the FBI in order to get that forensic evidence analyzed.
You know, I would like to be a lie detector applicator, if you will. An instructor or whatever they call the person who gives it.
You mean like an administrator?
Administrator or whatever.
An
like,
applicator?
Yeah.
What are you, a tampon?
Yeah, well, if you push me some places and pull the string, things do happen. I must say.
Okay, Dylan's a really comfortable applicator, just letting everybody know.
But the reason, you know why I would like to be the person who gives the person the lie detector?
Are you just going to ask them some off-the-wall shit?
I'm not. I'm just at the end. If I don't believe them and I feel like the, instrument is saying that they are indeed lying, I would stand up and declare loudly, "You're a damn lie." Boom.
Ah,
Yeah, that's where we are.
there it goes.
Here you go. That's the payoff,
Okay,
baby.
Okay. Now, reports of nighttime prowlers poured in on Wednesday. Multiple residents claimed to have seen someone lurking in the neighborhood.
I used to find myself lurking, and I wasn't even trying to do it. But if you lurk, if you just kind of...
Okay.
What?
Back up.
No.
Back up, Dylan. I need to know more about this lurking. Where were you lurking? What were you doing?
Sometimes I'll be a play. Sometimes I get confused, right? And I have to take a minute.
Sometimes.
And walk around like in a
Honey.
circle and get my bearings and figure out what the hell I'm doing. I forget why I'm even here.
Your brain is like in a constant
Yeah.
state of confusion.
And-
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I'm not a huge guy, but I'm not a small guy either. I'm, just right. I'm like the porridge in the Goldilocks and the Bears story.
Okay.
I'm just right.
It's so cute. It thinks that.
Some people would be like, is this guy lurking? But I'm not. There is not a nefarious, lurky, creepy bone in my body.
Again, I'm still not understanding. So you're telling me you were just like roaming around the streets? You might be lost and you're just lurking.
It can happen during my normal day. I'm going from point A to point B.
Okay.
Be it errands or I have some kind of goals in mind most of the time. And, I forget what I'm doing. So it takes me a minute. I might loiter, if you will, which I think the term loitering is
Just
very...
like a random street, like in a neighborhood?
Or you come out of a convenience store, and you might loiter right there by the door and smoke a cigarette or something while you contemplate your next move.
Okay, you had me thinking you was like standing in
Well,
some
honey,
bushes.
I'm not in nobody's bushes, dude. I ain't a bitch in the bush. What are you talking about?
You look like a bush
I am
bitch
not.
to me.
Look, I am not a bush bitch for one thing. Okay, but I ain't never been in the bushes looking and lurking, sitting and looking, standing.
Okay,
and
well,
looking
that's what
or
you made
nothing.
it sound like.
Okay, well,
you
no.
got listeners out there thinking maybe they need to report you to authorities
Well,
because
look,
you've been lurking.
Maybe I crossed up the terms loitering and lurking. I've been known to loiter here and there. Maybe it's not lurk.
Okay, so when you say loiter, I understand because you do loiter, like in front
I
of a gas
loiter in our
station
house.
while you smoke
Yeah.
and like fiddle with whatever lighter.
And I go away from, like we're on a trip. Heather gets out. She's like, I'm going to pump gas. I'm like, that's awesome. Cool. I'm going to walk over here and smoke, out away from people and away from the doorways.
Yeah,
the
and then
gas
you call
pumps.
me over to like check out this exceptional drainage ditch. And you're like, they really hit the mark with this one. And I'm just like, what is wrong with you? Okay.
Hey, look, high quality infrastructure means a lot to everyone in the area. And when I see quality work, I'm going to point it out.
Oh, I know. You've pointed out some
Drainage means so
some
much to
shit
communities.
that I don't care about, but thank you for that, Dylan.
Communities have no idea how important drainage is.
You guys have no idea what it's like to live with this man.
It's true.
Plainclothes officers interspersed among the 300 funeral attendants who filed into St. Anne's Roman Catholic Church hoping to possibly spot a suspect there. These detectives are really on top of their game. I mean, they are aware that a lot of times killers return to the crime scene, that they make their way to the funeral.
Now, I got to say, these guys and gals are, they're up on the cutting edge. And they're doing their job.
1971, man, they're doing the police work.
They're doing a good
that they're
job at
supposed
their
to do.
job.
Detectives would later say, quote, encouraging, but some of it turned out to be discouraging when discussing some of the evidence and information that surfaced.
Well, you start getting a ton of information.
Well, let's get into
when
some of
happens.
this, Dylan.
Yeah.
Burlington police began to make some troubling discoveries. And this is the part of the story that really, I guess, hit me hard. Not only do we have the murder of this poor young woman, but when this information starts to surface, this is very scary.
Oh, my gosh.
Rita, like other young women around town, had been receiving anonymous phone calls, which were described as threatening in nature.
So this has happened to multiple women or have come forward saying this has been happening.
Young women started coming forward to say they had experienced intruders in their homes, with most being sexually assaulted.
Oh, my gosh.
So can you imagine you're just in your home, wake up in the middle of the night, and there's a stranger
No, I can't.
in your room that sexually assaults you?
No.
And due to fear and embarrassment, these victims failed to report the crimes.
And that's very common. And honestly, that's the sad part of anytime you talk about sexual assault in any form is the victim blaming, the slut shaming, all that stuff that happens to this day in 2023 in certain versions, or one way or the other, connotations, or they allude to the fact of this and that. And that really is sad that makes true victims of sexual assault and sexual crimes be silent because they don't want to be dragged through whatever in public. And that really pisses me off.
Investigators were alarmed at the number of victims who had failed to report their attacks. In the city's Hill section, there were multiple reports of peeping Tom incidents. Police began digging through previous cold cases to see if any linked to Rita's murder. A rape was investigated on Green Street nearby, but it was ruled out as having no connection to Rita's murder. They determined there was no connection with the Curran murder and the beating death of a farmer named Harry Webb. Another tip came in about a young woman who lived on Loomis Street. She was receiving the same phone calls as Rita Curran. One evening, she heard a prowler trying to get into her apartment. The woman peered out the chain-secured door, and the perpetrator saw her and ran away.
Oh, my gosh. Even that would scare the shit out of me, honestly.
On the night of Rita's murder, a woman who lived on Main Street reported an encounter with a strange man. He was with a dog. He knocks on the woman's apartment door. When she answered, he asked for a former tenant. He said this person lived there before. And the woman informed him no one by that name lived there. And as she's giving him this information, like, hey, I'm sorry, you've got the wrong house, the dog runs into the apartment. Without permission, this man pushes past this woman to retrieve his dog.
Oh, no, that's not okay in so many ways.
Well, get this. The man was surprised to find the woman's boyfriend sitting on the couch in the living room. As soon as he realized there was another man in the house, the stranger snatched the dog and quickly departed the residence.
Oh my God, has he trained this dog to help him get in people's houses?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Is that what happened?
Jesus.
Curious, the woman asked the landlord later about the former tenant and learned no one by that name had ever lived in that apartment.
So he's bullshitting her, basically.
But thankfully, she had her boyfriend there because this could have easily gone sideways.
I'm saying, could you imagine if a dude comes around the corner and see my big-headed ass sitting over there on the couch? He's not going to know exactly what I'm going to do next because I appear to be a bit unstable when you look directly at me.
Well, you do look a little wild-eyed.
I can be.
You could headbutt the shit out of
Oh,
somebody.
dude, if I headbutt a son of a bitch, they going to forget everything.
You can knock them the fuck out with that.
Yeah,
head.
I'll be like, they'll wake up and they think they're a new nationality.
Sure. They wake up and they're like, oh, I'm in...
No, I speak Portuguese.
Guatemala. Okay. Right away, police interviewed people connected to Rita, including all the residents who lived in the apartment building. And the way it's described to me is it almost seems like, I wouldn't call it maybe an apartment, but maybe like a big house that's been converted.
Yeah, there's a lot of that.
Kind of like a boarding house style.
There's a lot of that around us. There's some homes right around us that actually have shared common areas, which would be, actually along that style as well. You have rooms and they have like shared living rooms and kitchens. They might have a bathroom if you're lucky attached to the room. Yeah.
With just over an hour for the perpetrator to determine if anyone was home inside the apartment, gain entry to the apartment, attack and kill Rita, then leave undetected, it was likely the suspect was familiar with the house, its occupants, and didn't have to travel far to commit the murder.
I think that's a reasonable conclusion.
The second floor neighbor was a man named William DeRoos, and he was questioned. DeRoos had a criminal record, so he was definitely a person of interest for police. Yet his wife, Michelle, provided him with an alibi. The couple had been home all night, but said they had not heard any sounds from the ground floor apartment. So they're directly living above Rita's apartment, and they claim they didn't hear anything. Even though police were conducting a thorough investigation, they just could not solve Rita's murder at the time. Despite hundreds of tips, a suspect remained unidentified. On the day of Rita's funeral, District Attorney Leahy announced a media blackout. The police would not be releasing any more information in the case. They wanted to keep details close to the cuff. The lead detective told the media, quote, "We have developed some new and encouraging leads, but I can't say any more than that. It will be handled in secrecy." Now, this could be a good thing, but it could also be a bad thing.
Well, and that's when the public's like, oh, they're not doing anything. Or sometimes the family's like, oh, the cops aren't even trying. When in reality, they're keeping all this stuff quiet because it could really help them identify the true killer. Oftentimes as we all know, you'll get people that entered or, put themselves into the story or interject in some weird way. And if they don't know these very important details of the crime scene, things like that, it really helps them weed out the wackos, if you will.
So the case has gone cold at this point, and detectives are just trying their hardest to develop a suspect. In Yarmouth, Massachusetts, law enforcement apprehended a drifter named Charles Manning, who had admitted to killing 19 women. But it was unknown if Manning had been in Burlington around the time of Rita's murder.
Oh
Another suspect was floated, Ted Bundy.
Wait, what was that last guy's name?
Charles Manning?
He admitted to killing 19 women? Why do
I've never heard of this guy.
Oh my gosh.
I know. We're going to look into
We're
Charles
going to follow
Manning.
that up at least for the patrons. My goodness.
So again, Ted Bundy is floated later on as a suspect. After Bundy's arrest, retired FBI agent John Bassett suspected he had been responsible for Rita's murder. Bundy had been born in Burlington at the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers. The Colonial Motor Inn, where Rita had worked that summer job as a chambermaid, was on the same street. Investigators were curious about this prospect and learned that Rita looked very similar to Ted Bundy's girlfriend at the time.
Oh, wow.
Additionally, the MO was much like Bundy. Rita's sister, Mary Campbell, wrote to Bundy in prison and asked if he had killed her sister. Ted Bundy refused to answer the question. However, Bundy had interviewed with a detective and admitted to murdering a woman in Burlington in 1971. He claimed the trip had been to secure a copy of his birth certificate. Law enforcement were able to verify that Ted Bundy had not been in Vermont at the time of Rita's murder. But for a while, Bundy seemed to be the best lead they'd had.
Well, how would you not think that? Seriously, his personal connection to the area, literal street, same street, and the possibility that he came back into town for any other business. Yeah, you'd have to think that.
And he fits the profile.
And she almost fixed his victim list.
Exactly. Victimology. She looks like a lot of his victims. Yeah. It's the same MO, same brutal blitz-style attack. We know he liked to break into homes and attack women who were sleeping.
It's true.
50 years is a long time to wait on answers, especially when a loved one has been so cruelly murdered. The advancements in DNA technology opened doors for investigators.
But see, the original investigators collecting all this evidence in a proper way that has nice chain of custody, so it can go straight to trial and prove, its viability as evidence. That's where it starts. And if they don't do that back in 71, 20, 30, 40 years later, you can't have, this evidence to test.
In 2019, the Burlington Police Department's Detective Service Bureau reactivated the unsolved cold case of Rita Curran. Investigators wanted to approach the case as if it had just happened, not like it was almost a half century old.
That's an interesting concept.
On September 19th of 2014, a detective sent the cigarette butt, some nail scrapings, and slides containing vaginal swabs to New York City's Office of Chief Medical Examiner for DNA testing. The Lark brand cigarette butt that was found underneath Rita's right elbow was of keen interest. 2 of Rita's roommates smoked, but not that brand, so it was likely that someone other than the residents of that household had smoked the cigarette and dropped it, or somehow left it in the center of the crime scene.
Yeah, and it was literally, they found the ashes of this burned out cigarette under her elbow or under her arm. So, this cigarette was being smoked or smoldering during the time.
It seems like a very
it's pretty
key piece of evidence.
I
right?
agree. I thought so.
I've never even heard of Lark.
No, I know that's some old timey
brand. I was going to say that's vintage, right? Law enforcement hoped the cigarette still had DNA on it. New York City OCEM was able to obtain a male DNA profile from the cigarette. The male DNA profile pulled from the Lark cigarette butt was enough to compare to a number of suspects on the list through either direct comparison, they used CODIS to exclude, and familial comparisons.
Nice.
At least 13 suspects were excluded by comparison to the DNA on the cigarette butt. The DNA from the cigarette butt was also compared to the first responders, the officers, and detectives who were on the scene, as well as Rita's roommate, Paul.
Yeah, and
all were excluded.
And that's just as important as finding the perpetrator, is excluding all these different people who've been kind of on the back burner on your list for whatever reason. And you don't have to pay them any attention anymore.
The DNA profile from the cigarette butt was entered into CODIS, which is the Combined DNA Index System. But at the time, there was no match, meaning that the potential suspect had never been convicted of a felony before or since Rita was murdered, or that his profile had not been entered into the database as of 2014. Now, in 2016... police in Vermont heard back from the New York City Chief Medical Examiner's Office regarding the 2 other items that had been sent in for testing. So the fingernail scrapings and the vaginal slides did not yield enough DNA, unfortunately. In addition to the cigarette butt found at the scene and the other evidence that was tested by this New York Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, that is a mouthful.
That sounds so important.
Every time I have to say it. There were other items of evidence that could potentially provide DNA evidence in the case, like Rita's clothing and the bedding, as well as sections of wood pulled from the doors that had blood on them. They saved everything.
Yeah, they did a great job.
They did a great job. Developing DNA profiles from additional items would be costly, so detectives were careful to choose which items were most likely, that would produce usable DNA.
This pisses me off every time it comes up. Cost of doing rape kits or DNA kits for murders. This should be federally funded all the way across the board. I'm sorry, people are like, oh, so we have hundreds of billions of dollars that float around for whatever reason here and there.
That float right out of the United States and into other countries. So why can't it float back to us?
It's our tax money. It's our tax revenue. And I would feel solving crimes and murders and rapes in my neighborhood, in my municipality, as one of the paramount uses of my tax money. I mean, seriously. This really should never, ever be a reason that stuff is not tested.
I agree with you. Absolutely. Well, they decided to send the drawstrings of Rita's house coat and the house coat itself. They had a piece of linoleum flooring that had a blood smear, underwear, 2 pieces of wood that had blood smears, and a portion of Rita's nightgown.
I mean, the fact they can get a DNA profile from a sample from 1971, 50 years later is really mind-boggling, honestly.
I know. It's really cool.
Yes, really awesome.
I mean, when you think about it, it's totally cool.
Yes.
I mean, it's a sad situation,
well,
but the technology is amazing. The evidence was hand-delivered to a lab in Florida that worked with new DNA extraction techniques like using the MVAC. And we've talked a little bit about the MVAC in some other cases. As the name hints, the MVAC is basically a vacuum cleaner type of system that they can extract DNA.
Wow.
By sucking,
yeah,
like a vacuum sucks it right up.
Suck it up.
In 2022, the DNA was sent to Parabon Nanolabs for sequencing, and that information was submitted to Family Tree DNA and GED Match. Family Tree DNA is a consumer genetic genealogy kit, like 23andMe, Ancestry, that allows people to connect with their heritage, right? You pay like $50, you spit in a little tube, you mail it in, and you find out, oh, hey, I descended from Vikings or whatever.
Oh, I'm from the Scottish Hill folk.
Exactly.
Oh, shite.
I am actually, I think, from the Hill folk.
No, you are definitely, because you're a gnome. She's a gnome, people.
Not a gnome.
I'm saying, though.
I'm a perfectly normal size adult, Dylan.
I'm like, what small knoll did you come from?
Yeah, I know. Today, you and our friend, y'all had fun making fun of.
What's because both you and your friend are both hill folk?
Because we're both like tiny, short people.
It's true.
I know y'all were cracking on us pretty hard about being short.
Well, no, I was just like, where's Gandalf?
I will get a step stool at some point.
Yes.
I don't have to have you to turn the ceiling fan on.
No, I was going to get one for my 4-year-old granddaughter so she can like wash her hands, brush her teeth at the sink. But I see that you can use it as well.
Well, I appreciate gifts.
You would use it.
Okay, so users who select a public opt-in on this GD match will have their DNA kit compared with kits submitted by law enforcement to identify perpetrators of violent crimes.
And I think that's the way to do it right there. You don't do some big brother thing where you suck up all the data and do whatever you want with it. You let people choose whether or not they want to opt into that system and let their profile, their familial DNA, if you will, profile go into the system. And that's the best way to do it. Some people say, no, that's too much, or I don't want to, I'm not interested in that. But I think many people would not care if their DNA goes in the public system and helps solve crimes.
And then you find out your cousin's baby mama best friend's uncle's nephew's brother that's married to your cousin did the crime.
I'll be like, you know what, your old shitty ass cousin, I told you he wasn't worth a damn. I did that 23andMe and all that stuff, whatever she said. And they said he done did it. He done shoplifted that anal cream down there at the pharmacy, and they got him dead to rights. They pulled it off.
Since you mentioned that, I happened to find in my hiking bag today a roll of stickers that say for rectal use only. So that was exciting.
Nice.
Now, Parabon Nanolabs chief genetic genealogist, her name is Cece Moore, And that is a name that has appeared in numerous crime stories as of late.
I swear I've heard that name before.
You probably have, because she's helped solve a lot of cold
You
cases.
get it, girl?
She's actually the one that performed the genealogy research in Rita's case. Among the new names to pop up with the DNA testing was none other than William DeRoos, the upstairs neighbor who lived at the Brooks Avenue apartment.
Oh my gosh. See, I knew it, dude. I seriously thought maybe.
Now let's get into this guy. Cold case detectives wrote in a 2023 report that it was a very strong chance that the person responsible for Rita's murder would have lived in close proximity to her, given that slim time frame
Right.
for attack. Though DeRoos was never considered a person of interest or really a suspect back in 1971, he was added to the top of the suspect pool in 2019. William DeRoos, unfortunately, Dylan, was already dead at this point. But let's talk a little bit more. The information was paramount in a case that had sat cold for decades. A suspect who lived just a floor up, whose DNA was found at the center of the crime scene, was identified thanks to this familial DNA comparison. Now law enforcement had a good starting point.
Now, was this off the cigarette butt? Or did they say? What piece of evidence led them down this path?
Well, I just told you what all was tested.
Well, no,
The
I know
nightgown,
that. No, yeah.
So
It's one of those.
I'm assuming one of those, Dylan, but
Okay.
I don't know for sure.
Well, that's all I was asking, if they ever pointed out exactly what part. But yeah, any of it would matter, right? Because your DNA, you're just a neighbor.
It don't matter at this point. What matters is we got the guy, bro. Okay. Now, law enforcement had a good starting point, but they still needed to independently compare the DNA from, like, the cigarette butt directly to DeRoos,
Right.
who's passed away. So they would need to find a relative as close to him as possible.
So preferably a kid.
William DeRoos died in San Francisco, California, of an acute morphine poisoning and overdose in 1986. He was cremated, meaning no biological material was available for DNA testing.
No exhumations.
So a close family member was the next best opportunity to confirm what this DNA analysis had already uncovered. The investigation was still awaiting results on the other evidence sent for analysis. At the time, the DNA Labs International was processing some additional evidence. The technicians were not notified that familial DNA comparison had found the possible identity of the DNA contributor on the cigarette. As part of the familial DNA results, detectives needed to collect a sample from, again, the closest living relative of William DeRoos for this direct DNA comparison. The Burlington Police Department was able to locate DeRoos' half-brother. He was very helpful in assisting detectives with the investigation and volunteered his DNA sample to compare to his half-brother, William. The sample was sent off for comparison to the profile found on the Lark cigarette butt, which came back with a 97.3 match to DeRoos. Law enforcement next wanted to interview DeRoos' former wife, Michelle Roach. She has since changed her first and last name, so she is living under a different identity at this point.
Now she's Michelle, or she's Lucy Palmetto
But
Bug.
back in 71, she offered a complete alibi for her husband. Remember, we've been at home all night. We heard nothing. We were hanging out watching TV.
Right.
We know nothing. We know nothing, Lebowski. She corroborated her husband's alibi when speaking with police. As I mentioned, they had been downstairs, blah, blah, blah. She hadn't heard anything. Burlington detectives traveled all the way to Oregon to meet with Michelle and interview her. Michelle and William, she called him Bill, they met in San Francisco sometime in 1970. They were both into what she referred to as, quote, the Buddhist scene.
Oh, yeah. I'm real familiar with the Buddhist scene.
They started dating and moved in together in California, but despite their relationship, she had never met any of Bill's family. All she knew was that Bill was one of 7 boys. That's a lot of boys.
That's a lot of boys, dude. For real.
Yes.
That's a lot of kids, period.
Although her memory was fuzzy, about a lot of the, I guess, finer details of her life at that time, she did remember that Bill had served time in prison twice while in California, and at least one of those charges and convictions was for armed robbery. So that sounds like, okay, he's not a guy who's afraid to break up in a place, right?
Well, no, armed robbery is a rather violent crime. I mean, honestly, you're running up on somebody with a gun, putting it in their face, and taking
and that just
whatever.
shows me you have no fear to break into someone's apartment.
No.
I mean, if you're willing to commit armed robbery, you probably don't have any qualms about climbing in somebody's window or walking in their house.
No, you don't. Because I put armed robbery up there with murder, rape. I mean, it's a very significant.
It's a very dangerous,
violent crime, honestly.
Exactly. Michelle and Bill broke up sometime before 1971, though she couldn't really remember why they'd broken up. She told the detectives that she never feared Bill and that he had never been physically abusive in their relationship. Bill was, quote, a serious Buddhist, according to his ex-wife, and therefore he didn't believe in violence, being a Buddhist.
Yeah, it could be an act. He could be something he puts, on to everyone around, and they'd be like, oh, no, Bill can never do that because he brushes ants away when he sits down.
After their breakup, Michelle ended up moving to Burlington and into her parents' house in the spring of 1971. Leaving Bill DeRoos behind in California. But a few months later, Bill showed up unannounced. Their relationship rekindled despite her parents' disapproval. They just were not fans of this guy at all. They didn't want their daughter with him.
Yeah, so they hate to see him show back up, right?
So when Michelle's parents moved to British Columbia, she and William moved in together, this time to an apartment on Brooks Avenue in Burlington.
Noise.
They got married on July 5th of 1971, just over 2 weeks before Rita Curran was attacked and murdered. So they had only been married a very short period of time when this murder takes place. The detective showed Michelle photos of Rita Curran. She remarked that Rita was beautiful, but she didn't recognize her, and she didn't remember ever socializing with any of the other tenants in the apartment building on Brooks Avenue, and she never thought they had formally met.
So they moved in the floor above 2 weeks before she was murdered.
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
Married and moved in this apartment.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. And his DNA has been proven to be inside the crime scene.
On the cigarette butt.
On the cigarette butt, which was literally under her body, basically.
But Michelle did remember being questioned on July 20th of 1971 in the early morning hours. A police officer told her that someone had been hurt badly in the apartment below them. She didn't recall the rest of the conversation with police, but she did remember what her then husband said to her after the officer left. William told Michelle not to mention that he had been home during the estimated, or that he hadn't been home. I'm sorry, that he had not been home during the estimated time of the murder.
Now, would that give you pause?
Well, yeah.
That would be a red flag for me. Okay, look, so this, for one, okay, so someone's been harmed. We don't know the details, but something's happened to floor below us. Enough that cops are going around questioning and interviewing everyone in the building. If you were to come to me when the cops leave and like, yeah, if you don't mind, if they come and ask any more questions, I was here with you, or don't tell them I wasn't here, that would be a problem for me.
Sometimes in these situations, and we hear this, that, a husband or a wife or whoever asks their partner,
a spouse,
will you lie for me? Or will you say, will you give me a fake alibi?
Yeah.
And I don't know if these people are just dumb or naive or what, but the first thing I'm thinking, if you come to me and say, hey,
you're guilty.
I know the cops were just here, but don't tell them.
Tell them I was here all night. We watched movies.
I'm not going to, I would immediately be like, what the,
No, I'd be like, why?
Yeah.
What were you doing?
What were you doing,
What
Dylan?
really happened was...
Yeah.
what the fuck were you really doing? Okay? I mean, you got to at least tell me you were doing something that's not exactly legal besides the murdering someone, that you just don't want to get into with the cops. Were you, like, sharing cocaine with your friend or something?
Again, I don't know if we need, Mr. Dodson to show up and be like, you are so dumb, but Bill's reasoning was...
You were so dumb.
Okay, listen now. Bill's reasoning was he had a criminal record, so he didn't want police to try to pin this crime on him.
Well, and honestly, I mean, that would be some kind of a reason, I guess. Even if I didn't believe that was going to happen or that they cared a damn about you, you know, that would give me some kind of a reasoning for it. I still don't think I'd be comfortable with it. And I still would feel like there's more to it.
I wouldn't be comfortable with it because if you're not here, a crime's been committed. Well, then where were you? And if you were really there, then you have an alibi, and I don't have to provide you one.
Well, that's a really logical point coming from Miss Heather. See, that's the way you are. You're just straightforward. You're a realist. And you're like, well, where were you? And if you were there doing X, Y, Z, then just tell them that. And you probably have proof, right? If you were doing that with or around anyone.
Yeah, I'm never going to be covering for somebody.
How about, look, I was in the closet doing an 8-ball. I just don't want to get into it. And there wasn't nobody seen me do it because I don't like to share.
All right. But William was, in fact, not home during that narrow 70-minute window that Rita Curran was assumed to have been attacked and killed.
That's a very small window, basically an hour. You know what I mean?
Michelle told detectives those 50-plus years later, she still remember this 50 some odd years later, that she and her husband of 2 weeks had gotten into a, quote, quarrel, and he'd went for a cool down walk.
Okay, for 70 minutes.
Michelle didn't know how long he was gone or when he came back. She didn't remember if he came back, that if he had any injuries, scratches, anything like that. She couldn't recall what he was wearing or even if he had done laundry that night or if any of the articles of clothing were gone like after this murder.
So nothing about that evening when he come back stood out to her. He wasn't frantic. He wasn't, obviously blood covered. He didn't, do anything weird. Nothing really stood out that she recalled.
Michelle also couldn't remember what brand of cigarettes William smoked, but she said he did smoke. He was a smoker. She assured detectives, and this was during a 2022 interview, that if she had any suspicion that her husband was responsible for Rita's death, she would have, quote, quietly gone to police. Michelle said she never directly asked Bill if he had killed Rita, but the thought of him committing such a brutal act was inconceivable.
Inconceivable.
Every time I see that word, I have to say it.
Well, you have to.
Inconceivable.
That's from The Princess Bride for anyone who doesn't know.
Oh, they know.
They know.
They know, Dylan. Our listeners, they're cool. They know.
Well, if they don't know, now you do know. So there you go.
They know.
They know.
Soon after Rita's murder, Bill moved to Thailand without Michelle.
That's not weird at all, bud. You moved out of the country.
She did eventually join him there in March of 1972. Bill was a Buddhist monk at the time, but he was disrobed, losing his status as a monk.
Oh my gosh.
They traveled around Thailand together for some time before Bill became a monk again, and she became a nun.
You know how hard it was when the weather would go, south and get bad, and him going around naked because he's been disrobed? Yeah.
You're so funny, Dylan. Hashtag dad jokes.
Yeah.
So he's a monk. She becomes a nun. Given these circumstances, their marriage dissolved.
So he's a monk
because
in Thailand.
It was against the rules for them to have a relationship.
Well, yeah, you can't mix that yolk, bud. It says it right there in the good book. But so there is a call for nunning in this area. So is that true in Thailand?
They're Buddhists.
There is a Buddhist nun? I'm sorry, I'm lost. I thought it was a Catholicism thing.
Honey, they're Buddhists.
This Buddhist nuns, nice.
He became a Buddhist monk and she became a Buddhist nun.
Oh, and
I don't know. I don't live in Thailand. I don't know how it works, Dylan.
Okay,
I'm just trying to tell you the story. Why are you asking me all these stupid questions?
Well, I didn't think it was stupid because I was just getting some clarification.
We've been talking about them being Buddhist.
Well, no, that's fine.
So now all of a sudden they're Catholic?
I just never heard nun tied to Buddhist.
Next, you're going to accuse them of being Muslim.
And he was a priest. He was a Buddhist priest at this point.
Then we find out he's worshiping the flying spaghetti monster.
And he lives at the rectory.
No,
Things
Dylan.
are getting weird.
I'm making an assumption that they're still Buddhist.
Okay. So I think I would say it's their celibacy. Vows to God.
Michelle stayed in Thailand for about a year and a half, and William moved on to another country, but she couldn't remember which one. He's just moving around being a Buddhist monk, Dylan.
He's just running around like flying through the air and shit, bud. It's crazy.
The last time she had any contact with her then husband was just before she moved out of Thailand. William asked her for some money to fund his next trip, but she refused. And she never saw Bill again, even though they had to go through a lawyer to get an official divorce without William's signature on paperwork because she couldn't track him down after this to get a divorce.
Dude, he was like he's the no-faced nut or monk at this point. He's just going around, sneaking around in dark alleys, stopping criminals in their tracks. He's the bulletproof monk, y'all.
Michelle told investigators, quote, "We had no relations with those people. Why would he do that? He never asked for a cup of sugar, nothing. So we never interacted with these neighbors. I would have no reason to think he would have murdered this girl."
Oh, okay. Well, that's a good point.
Although it took 50-some years, Rita Curran's case could finally officially be closed. So by 2023, the Detective Service Bureau was certain that William Jerus was responsible for the murder of Rita Curran. Burlington police went public. They made the announcement on February 21st of 2023 that Vermont's oldest cold case was finally solved. Sadly, Rita's parents passed away before they were able to see their daughter's case solved.
Gosh, 50 years is such a long time.
But Rita's siblings, Tom and Mary, finally got the closure that they desired.
And that's a great thing about these cold cases. There's always going to be someone who didn't make it, parent who didn't live to see, or brother or sister. But it's so heartwarming that you have these, be it siblings or kids or grandkids, who never thought they would get answers in this story that's affected their family for generations. And then they finally do get. And I think in this case, I think they called good money. I think this is safe to say that they found the perpetrator of the crime. Would you agree?
I believe so. DNA technology
Man, I'm telling you,
pretty amazing.
It's so amazing. It really is. And to get some kind of closure, even to the public, of course, the family matters more, and any family members is just a really wonderful thing.
By the way, Dylan, they do have Buddhists in Thailand.
Well, I knew that.
And there was a law created in 1928 by the Supreme Patriarch, of course, of Thailand that made it illegal for women to take full ordination.
Okay, so they can't be ordained as a Buddhist?
As like a
Buddhist priest,
like a nun or a monk.
Okay,
but I guess they're still considered nuns, even though technically it's illegal. If that makes sense.
Come on, Thailand, do better. I think they should be able to be nuns if they want to be. Be it a Buddhist nun.
How about it ain't none your business?
How about you just let people do what they want and let
Dylan,
them be?
Oh
my gosh.
Found this case. I just found it to be a very disturbing case of this poor young woman who was brutally murdered in her own home while
inside
she's
of an
sleeping in her bed.
And in the hour.
In her sanctuary where she feels safe. It's the first time she's been on her own. She's just a young woman trying to make her way in the world.
No, and her friends go and roommates go have a drink for like an hour that she's left alone, basically. And they come back and find her in this state. I mean, how tragic and scary is that? Then
you couple that with this information coming out about all of these women who are living in this area, in this town, around this college campus, in the same time frame, that are admitting that they've had intruders in their home, that they've been sexually assaulted by strangers,
or the menacing calls,
that there have been these menacing calls, that they've had peeping toms.
Dude,
I mean, this is a real problem.
It's such deviant behavior.
And of some of the cases, because I didn't go, I mean, I could have reported a lot more in this case, but we don't have hours. We're working with
maybe we should do a follow up
here
with the patrons. That's a good idea.
But there was a couple of women who had reported to police having seen a person a man wearing like a green windbreaker prowling around their home, and there were multiple reports of a guy wearing the same green windbreaker. So then it's like, well, you've obviously got somebody who's peeping and prowling, but it sounds like, but you have many other men doing the same thing in this community.
Well, or it's the same person.
Well, but I doubt it's just the one person doing it, because I
Because
doubt
of
one
the
person
volume.
is terrorizing like 20 or 30 women and making the calls. And
What if he was just randomly opening the
okay,
phone book?
well, see, you're just ridiculous.
I'm not being ridiculous. Maybe he got off on that.
Oh, so it's the guy in the green windbreaker. He's doing all of it. Okay, cool, Dylan.
Well, no. Okay.
Okay, sure.
What?
I love Dylan's contributions always.
No, either way, it's certainly, like you're saying, very disturbing that these women are being victimized in this way.
I'm saying that it's
cases.
disturbing that there are multiple predators in this area who have terrorized a fairly significant group of women.
I agree completely.
Because when you've got more than, 2, 3 that are experiencing this, that's a fucking problem, bro. You got a problem in your area.
No, it's true. It's let alone upwards of 20 or 30 victims. I mean, that's a whole lot in one area. Definitely. And I think the guy in the green windbreaker's not doing it all. I mean, that's a valid point. But him coming up and up, up in multiple sightings and stuff like that and descriptions, I would find that very disturbing, as from being an investigator in that area. Because obviously this person's up to no good.
Okay. Thank you for that.
I would go fight him like an
you're
unbreakable, like Bruce Willis.
Very useful with your opinions. All right, guys. Thank you for listening to the case of Rita Curran today. We will be back with our midweek on Wednesday.
It's true.
Anything else, Dylan?
No, we had a great day. And that was an interesting episode. Thank you for that case. I'd never heard that story, and it's scary. I mean, to just imagine leaving your home for an hour and leaving someone there. I think we all do that, or a lot of us do that often, be it kids, friends, family, whatever, and coming back and they've been violated and attacked like that. That's such a scary thought.
Another reason why I chose this case is to showcase the amazing DNA technologies that we have today, and we've discussed it numerous times about murders, like the ethical conversation about should this DNA that people are submitting to find their family heritage be used to solve crimes?
Right.
Where is the line drawn? I mean, you're pointing to the fact that, this particular company is getting consent from
You opt in or out.
individuals.
Yeah. I think that's the way to go.
But I like hearing that cases are being solved, especially these cold cases that have had no break, no movement
For decades.
30, 40, 50 years. And then now, bam, you've got answers.
It's always familiar DNA.
That rocks.
That's awesome.
I hate that these crimes happen, but I like it when families get answers.
Or just to have
and get some closure. And we know. And when they're able to lock a piece of shit up and throw him in jail, that makes me happy.
Or at least even if they've died, announce their name as being the perpetrator in this crime. Make them have some kind of accountability. I agree completely, Heather. And thank you for that. And until next time, we're going to be right here waiting on you.
Are we?
Is that our catch line now?
I don't know.
Okay, let's try it out.
How about we'll leave the porch light on for you.
But y'all come back now.
You hear?
Bye.
You like that?